Welcome to another episode of How to DragonCon. My name is Kong. I will be your guide. Where did the time go? I do apologize for being away most of the year, my friends. We're already under the 75-day mark to DragonCon 2026. Super excited about that. But just a side tangent for myself, I quit my day job in February, so I've been actually trying to make it full-time as a content creator, meaning I have to pretty much pump out stuff every day for that other channel. In fact, you may even see a panel led by yours truly on how to actually survive and try to make money doing content. So keep an eye out for that one. But for the time being, we're here to talk about DragonCon. I want to give you some big updates for the 40th anniversary that they have going on this year, as well as covering the main topic of this video, which is budgeting for the con, right? With a lot of pro tips, little nuggets of wisdom thrown in there. As always, if you have something to share, the best part about DragonCon is that it's a community type event. So share in the comments what your typical budget is, what pro tips you would give, what tips you wish you had yourself if you were going as a newbie, because I love the community aspect and we're all here to learn together. But before we start on that, let's do some housekeeping tips, especially for you first timers or newbies. Hopefully you've already bought your badge at this time, because unfortunately from now until the actual event comes on, it is $180, which is the most expensive that it was in the last 12 months. It's not going to get any cheaper, so you might as well just get it now and just secure it, because there is a non-zero chance that the badges for the full weekend do sell out. And remember, you can't really buy anything at the door. Technically, you have to buy it online, and all you're doing in person is bringing a QR code, let the staff scan that, and then give you your physical badge. Speaking of which, yes, there are single day passes for DragonCon, as there has been every year. Historically, these will go on sale August 1st, but keep an eye on the official DragonCon social media for the announcement of when it will go on sale, as well as the prices. I'm going to put on the screen what the prices were last year. You can kind of imagine they'll be in the same ballpark, maybe $5 more per day if I had to guess. And a note about single day versus full weekend, because I saw a question recently asked online that kind of made me think about it and it stuck with me, right? If you're attending for 2 days or more, I would just go ahead and buy the weekend one. Don't buy two separate single day ones, because A, the price is going to be almost similar if you look at last year's prices, just for buying 2 different days compared to the whole full weekend badge. Two, more importantly, you're not going to lose precious time twice trying to wait in line to buy the badge one day, coming back and doing it all over again, especially if there's an early morning you want to attend on that second day. You don't want to lose precious hours in the beginning of the day and potentially even miss that thing that you're going to. So it's just safer to buy the full weekend badge. And as a surprising update, they apparently got rid of Eternal memberships. I really wasn't aware until I started doing research for this video, but they are no longer selling them. At the very least, they're pausing it. They were saying they may bring it back in the future. So honestly, I'm kind of bummed, because I was hoping to get rich in the next few years and I could finally score an Eternal badge. But you know what? That dream has temporarily been dashed. Finally, they've started announcing some big guests as we were getting into the summer, including David Tennant, Lena Headey, along with a lot of previously announced folks from beloved classics like Battlestar Galactica, Stargate, and Babylon 5. More of a side tangent, that's one of the big reasons I love this con, because they offer a space where older shows and, dare I say, less trendy guests still have a place to come, interact with fans, have panels, things like that, right? You don't see programming like this that are dedicated to some of the older shows, classic shows, niche shows at the more generic comic cons that you've seen popping up around the country. And if you look at the guest list for, again, one of the most common like generic comic cons, Fan Expo, they have some in every state. You'll see a lot of repeat guests that they have. So it's just nice to see a fresh lineup in the Comic Con scene that DragonCon brings. And before I get into it, a very important thing to note, please bring some cash to the event, right? Even though there are ATMs in the con footprint, there's a limited number of them. And keep in mind, they're not going to be refilled on Sunday and Monday, which Monday is Labor Day, it's a holiday. So you could be left stranded in the middle of the weekend with no cash, even though you really need some. Most vendors do take cards, but there are some, especially in the Walk of Fame, where cash just makes more sense. So I want you to know that in advance. All right, now for the topic at hand. The spending at DragonCon can be an enormous range. We're talking about 75,000 plus people. So you're going to have a broad range of financial situations, roughly like $300 for like bare bones minimalist budget, all the way up to thousands of dollars, maybe 5,000 plus, depending on how bougie you are. I would say the most common kind of like comfortable range is going to be between $1,500 to $2,500. That's where I end up most years since I've been going, and that's per person, $1,500 to $2,500 per person. Super duper budget conscious people can probably swing it for under $1,000, but it's going to be tight if you're staying at a relatively nearby hotel to get anything less than that. And of course, the biggest expense item for anybody is going to be the hotel. So for host hotels, they're typically around 350, maybe 400 a night. So based on that, you can expect to pay 1500 to 1800 for the room. Of course, it depends how you split it, whether it's you as part of a couple paying for it together, or if you're splitting with 2 other people, 3 other people, 10 other people, whatever it is you do. So you can kind of use that as a broad range. Again, so for me, my wife, that usually comes down to somewhere between $800 or so between the 2 of us each that we're contributing to the room. If you're doing non-host hotels like the nearby ones, the price is not really that much better. You may get shaved like 100 or 200 off, but it's really not too different until you start going to like Midtown or further away. If you're staying at a hotel that's along the MARTA line, you may be able to get something that's 200 or under per night. But that's typically like normal ranges. If it's holiday because of the Labor Day weekend, it could very easily well be over 200 or 250 a night. And of course, anytime I talk about rooms, avoid Airbnbs. You will not believe the number of horror stories I see every year. And this happens every year. It's not like a one-time thing. On Reddit, on Facebook, I don't care how highly rated or super host or whatever you're renting from, the Airbnb host will cancel on a certain percentage of you. They just do. That's what they've always done. They will continue to do this. They don't care about the repercussions, and you will be SOL if that happens to you like the week of con. So try to avoid Airbnbs as much as possible. And of course, we're talking about hotel. I have to talk about the other travel things like flying. I can't really predict where you're coming from. You could be coming from overseas, right? Or you could be coming from a different variety of states. You could be road tripping it. So that's going to vary drastically from person to person, depending on where you're coming from, what you're lugging, what you're having to bring for your costumes through different crates and stuff. However, if you ever want to save on that stuff and using credit card points and miles to the fullest extent, that's on my other pages. So cheap plug for myself, even though that page is much bigger on both Instagram, YouTube, especially TikTok. If you ever want to shave money off different Comic Cons, including DragonCon, be sure to check that out and reach out to me and I'll try my best to help you. And one last note about travel, if you're coming into the airport, of course, you can take the MARTA all the way to literally the grounds of DragonCon. It's not a very convenient public transit center, but for the purposes of getting from the airport to the DragonCon area footprint, it's very convenient. You want to get off at Station Peachtree Center or N1. I would recommend you do this if you don't have a whole lot of luggage. But of course, again, if you have lots of crates, several large luggage things, you might just be better off Ubering or taking a shuttle. Okay, let's move on to food. So you can probably do this bare bones for maybe like 25 and under a day. One of the things I would recommend is go to the con suite frequently. If you didn't know, the con suite is offered to everyone who attends. As long as you have a badge, you are eligible to go in there. It is on the second floor of the Hyatt, right above that corner kind of like gift shop convenience store with all the food and snacks. But the con suite pretty much runs 24 hours. I think starting from Thursday, you can go in there and they'll always have at least some type of free drinks, soda, snacks like nachos, hot dogs, things like that. It kind of depends when you go. But if you're hurting for a meal and you have zero budget in those few hours, definitely check out the con suite. Of course, another thing I can't really predict, but a way for you to save money is bring your own snacks. We typically go and do the grocery shopping for DragonCon beforehand. Gotten pretty smart about it, not to bring like overpack and do things that you end up just not eating going to waste. So definitely be mindful of that. But I would say at least $100 grocery trip should last you the 4 to 5 days that you're at DragonCon. Okay, what about after you arrive? You've already brought your snacks and stuff, but you just want to eat a lot of the food in the con footprint. That's basically what I do. I say YOLO to my food budget and I get something for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I would say for me that averages somewhere between like 60 to 75. Definitely more if you start adding in a bunch of random snacks. But there are 2 different food courts that you can go to. There are different food trucks that are outside the Cortland Grand most of the days. These are typical food prices. They're going to be $15 a meal, $20 a meal, more if you add different entrees, add-ons, drinks, things like that. But you can easily expect to spend between 50 to 80 if you're going to eat out every meal. Of course, this gets way more expensive if you have a formal dinner reservation. If you're going to any type of sit-down restaurant, whether that's in the area or inside the hotels, now you're looking at a bill easily like $30 bare minimum per person. Over 50 is probably a pretty common range. I could say potentially over 100 if you're going to some of the high-end restaurants and including tip in it. So it's just something to be mindful of. I may eat at one of those restaurants like once during the whole weekend. Anything beyond that, it's going to start really eating in on your budget. And related to that, of course, is alcohol, right? DragonCon is mostly known as a party con. The best thing you do to save money is BYOB. Bring your own beer, bring your own drinks ahead of time. There is a liquor store pretty much right in front of the Cortland Grand. They probably mark up their prices for the event, so I'd be very cautious about buying too much from there. So bring your own, save in advance. For the most part, I would say DragonCon is very lenient and lax about having your own kind of flasks and bottles on you. I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer or a police officer. I'm not advising you on open container laws. But for the most part, people do bring their drinks and they're walking around pretty freely. However, if you're going to be buying your drinks at the con event, at the hotels, that's going to be easily $15 per cocktail, maybe more. So it's just something to be mindful of. If you're getting multiple drinks, if you're not a lightweight like me, you're going to add up very quickly, get over $50, maybe even $100 just on the drinks alone. All right, let's skip over to Vendor Hall, Artist Alley, Art Show, just buying swag because you are at a Comic-Con, right? You want to buy swag and merch, support small artists, things like that. I totally get it. Now, of course, you can just window shop. That is $0. It's free, but odds are you're going to be enticed to buy something. At the very bare minimum, I think over the last few years, I've ended up spending about $500 over the course of the weekend. And that's still me being selective. I'm not buying any major big pieces, but you can imagine for most artists, their like smallest book or print, it's going to be about $10 to $20. Of course, they have smaller things like magnets and stickers that are just a few dollars. But if you're going to buy from at least a few different artists every day, it will add up to about 100, maybe 100 plus. So just something to keep in mind. Of course, if you're balling out and you're buying like one-of-a-kind pieces that people have in the art show, those could be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. That's not something that I've done, but it's just something to keep in mind that it is possible and you can end up spending a lot without knowing it. Of course, if you do want a pro tip, I would tell you to shop on Monday. That's going to be the lightest that the whole vendor hall, exhibitor hall area is going to be. You don't have to wait as long. Keep in mind, though, the longer it goes on Monday, the more you risk people closing up shop and leaving early. If you don't want to wait a whole lot in line, I would advise you go to the art show, which is in the bottom floor of the Hyatt. There's almost never a wait to get in there. It is a more limited, curated set of artists, so the prices may be higher because I really do think it's like next level down there. But it's just something to keep in mind. If you don't want to wait and just look at a handful of things and artists and vendors, go to the art show. If you want to dedicate a few hours to shopping and an hour just to get in, go to the vendor hall. And before the summary, I'm going to hit some costs and line items that may sneak up on you, things that you're not thinking about. So if you're parking at a hotel, whether that's a host hotel or an offsite or nearby hotel, don't forget the parking. A lot of these hotels have gone to valet only. Not only do you have to account for some tip, but a lot of these rates, they start at $20. For the more high-end hotels, I've seen the Hyatt and the Ritz-Carlton, I think, charge $50 or $60 per day. So that's something sneaky that may be tacked on to the end of your hotel bill that you weren't expecting. Now, the alternative is you can use a lot of the lots nearby. I think DragonCon has some info. I've never done these, so I can't really speak to it, but they should have info on like Spot Hero or reserving a parking spot in advance. That should dramatically bring down the cost, maybe by 50%, but it's still something you would look into sooner than later in case they get full. Of course, you've got tip, whether that's for hotel staff, housekeeping, bellhops, anything, that's at your discretion. I like to leave at least $5 a day for housekeeping, $5 anytime anyone handles my luggage in and out of the car. Big one here is celebrity interactions. If you didn't know, if you're completely new to coming to Comic-Cons, it is technically free to wait in line just to chat with a celebrity, but they're not going to let you talk for very long. They're expecting that you are paying some kind of money, usually for an autograph on something or a photo at their table, or you pay for the professional photo op, which is in a different area. These have really gone up in price. Back when I started in 2008, you can get $20 for like a selfie at the table, right? Nowadays, most of the stuff at the table, like the cheapest autograph, the cheapest selfie, I want to say it's like $50, maybe $60 for some guests. And of course, a lot of the bigger names, they're charging well into the hundreds for any type of interaction with them. So this can add up very quickly if you're new to Comic Cons or new to DragonCon. It's just a big expense that I would anticipate you spending if your main reason to come is to meet some celebrity guests, which tends to be the case for a lot of newbies. Alrighty, to summarize, again, the range of budget for DragonCon can drastically vary depending on who you are. If you're doing a bare bones minimalist budget, if you're someone who commute into town, you can probably do it for a few $100s, mostly with the badge and whatever food and drinks and swag that you buy on site. For most people, it's going to be at least $1,000. And of course, the more comfort you want, the higher it's going to go. Again, for me, that falls between $15,000 to $2,000. most years. It could certainly be way more than that if you have more expensive taste. But hopefully that has helped you. If you found this video useful, please again, like, subscribe. Now that the summer of con is here and I do need to justify getting a media badge like this one for DragonCon, I will definitely be putting out some new videos in the summer. I may do a rehash of some of the tips and tricks that may have changed, things that are the most useful for newbies and beginners, since that's mostly what my channel is aimed for. But if you have any recommendations, things you want to see, please let me know, and I will see you next time.